All right, so in this video, I'm gonna be going over the exact things that I've been doing to get better at portrait painting. All right, welcome to Paint Coach. My name is Chris Fornatero, and I'm here to help simplify oil painting so that you can get better faster. All right, now before I jump in, I wanna ask everyone a question. What part of portrait painting do you find to be the most difficult? What thing do you always struggle with? You just can't get right, or like you see other portraits and you're like, oh, how did they do that? You know, is it getting the features? Is it skin tones? Is it drawing? Is it whenever the head is tilted, you just mess everything up? Let me know in the comments section below. So about a couple months ago, I took a step back and kind of looked at where I was with my portraits and what I was doing. And I felt I needed to change some things to get past the level that I was at. I felt I had gotten stagnant with my portrait painting. There were certain aspects of it that didn't seem that challenging to me, but at the same time, I felt I kept running into the same issues, and I never really had sat down and diagnosed, what my weaknesses were with portraits. And that all kind of changed when I went to a portrait painting workshop with Michael Shane Neal, and just being around somebody at that level, also getting the chance to paint from life and be around other painters, it was a good way to get a fresh look on my work and what I was doing and where I could go with it. So after that workshop, I was like, okay, I want to kind of focus in on this one aspect of my work and get better at it. So I kind of implemented a regimen or just a way of working to make sure I take steps in the direction that I want. And the first thing I did was I made it easy to practice. I went online and bought a bunch of canvas panels to practice on. I like using just the regular Fredrix acrylic primed panels. I got a bunch of 16 by 20s because I wanted to work bigger, because one of the weaknesses I figured out at that workshop was I tend to paint heads too small. If anything, I'm gonna make them too small than too big. So I was like, all right, I need to fix that. Let's go the opposite direction. Let's work on big canvas panels. So I got a bunch of 16 by 20s. I really like them because, they're pretty absorbent, which I like for my portraits because I like to start pretty thin with my paint, spread the paint around, and that gives me the ability to, as the painting progresses, to add more and more paint. If the surface is too slick and too small, the paint gets piled up really quickly, and then you might as well be pushing the paint around with a shovel. But for the way I like to work, these panels work great. Relative to other panels, they are not very expensive. You can get them on Amazon. I'll put a link to where you can get that in the description below. But I take it even a step further in that I prep a bunch all at once, meaning I will tone them with a wash. Sometimes I'll use, sap green and burnt umber, sometimes cerulean blue and burnt umber. Sometimes I've done it with yellow ochre and ivory black, just trying to get a neutral wash. I'll put some paint down, get some paint thinner, wipe it with a paper towel and let it set and dry for, a day or so. So it's dry when I go to paint on it. And then I will even take one when it's done and put it up on my easel before I even know what I'm gonna paint. So I always have a canvas panel sitting there ready to go, just staring at me, begging me to paint on it. So to kind of recap that, I've done 3 things to entice myself to paint. 1, I spent money and bought a bunch of canvas panels, so I'm gonna feel that obligation to paint something on it. 2, I spent the time to prep them so they are ready to go. If I didn't do that and I saw something I wanted to paint, I'd be like, oh man, but I gotta prep a canvas and I gotta wait for it to dry, and I'm just not gonna get to it today. But I prepped it, and then I put it up on there so it's always staring at me in the face. When it comes to practicing, don't make too big of a deal out of it. If you have a canvas that you're not using, or a canvas with a failed painting on it, you can paint over top of it. You got a big canvas that you don't know what to do with, just start doing a bunch of little sketches and studies on it. That's how I started the Nick Cage painting. I had this big 20 by 30 canvas that was just kind of staring at me for a while. I was like, I want to practice doing a portrait. Found this picture of Nick Cage, I'll throw it on here. I did one. It's like, I'm gonna do another one. Did another one. I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool little thing happening here. There's actually a painting from Sarasota, and it's just a bunch of studies of heads on a canvas, and he was just doing it as practice, but at the end, it's kind of like a piece in of itself, and it's really cool. I know painting materials are expensive, but try your best not to make a big deal out of using it. You're gonna get better through lots of repetitions and lots of practice. So anything that you can do to make painting as accessible as possible, everything's ready right there to jump in and start painting. All right, the second thing I did was I tried to paint from life more. That was another big thing that I took away from the workshop was, I was painting from life, from live models at the workshop, and I hadn't done that in a long time. And it's a completely different experience. You have to rely on different things, your head is constantly moving a little bit, theirs constantly moving. So you have to rely more on what you know and not always exactly what you see. You kind of have to like set the placement of the head and like that's the place, you know, even if you move or they move, like you have to keep it the way you started. And also just you're seeing colors differently, you're seeing values differently, you know, you're there with the person. You know, I do get regular experience painting from life, you know, I'm painting plein air every single week, but I did feel that it was a little harder painting a portrait from life than, you know, from a photo. So I was like, okay, I want to paint from life more, but I don't want to be limited by only being able to paint from life whenever I have access to a model or someone sitting. So I was like, all right, how do I do this so I can paint from life whenever I want? Well, I'm always here when I paint. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna run the risk of looking like an extremely vain artist and just be doing a bunch of self-portraits. So I went to Goodwill, got a big mirror, propped it up on my easel and started doing self-portraits. And also did exercises from life. You know, I made a video not too long ago about, you know, this exercise where you break the face down into its most simplest shapes. You know, you're not even really focused on features. You're just trying to get the overall shape and form of the head. You know, I did that one from life. If you want to check out that video, I'll put a link to where you can watch that above right now. And I went online and actually found a head model that had the planes. You actually got it right here. I got one of these and it's great because it really shows the planes of the face. You know, I've talked before that there's apps that will show you all this and those are good, but there's just something about it being, you know, in person, in real life, seeing it. You know, you can mess around with the lights and shine different lights on it and just get a really good feel for the planes and just the volume of the head. I feel like that's kind of the biggest thing that I've taken away from painting from life is that you have just such a better sense of volume when you're in the space and with, you know, the subject. It causes you to see things differently. And it's great to get the practice from life because when you do have to work from photos, you can transfer what you know from painting from life so much to the photos and you can kind of pull out more than what is in the photo. I find myself now, you know, changing so much of what I see in a photo when I do a portrait. Colors, the values, the form and everything, like I'm pushing and finding more than I was before. All right, next thing I did was I did more master copies and I've done these before. This time I really feel like I took a lot more away from them. You know, I did a Anders Zorn master copy and I felt after doing that my brushwork changed a bit, like kind of how I moved the brush on the canvas. I found myself keeping the brush on the canvas longer for every stroke. Like I'd kind of twist and move and turn and kind of see how long I could keep the brush on the canvas to get that softer flowing quality of the skin that you know see in a lot of Anders Zorn's portraits. And I also used the Zorn palette, which I haven't used that much, and I ended up liking Ivory Black so much that I added it to my regular palette. So my palette as of now that I use a lot for portraits are Ivory Black, Ultramarine Blue, Sap Green, Alizarin Crimson, Burnt Sienna, Yellow Ochre, Cadmium Lemon, and Titanium White. I don't know, I just like the black. It was kind of like a shortcut to a very desaturated blue if you ever needed desaturated blue because you just add the black and the white. You know, it's a quick desaturated blue. If you throw some red in there, it's a pretty desaturated purple. Also, the cadmium red with the ivory black makes a really good warm tone for dark shadows in a portrait. So it was pretty cool to do those exercises and then take something away from it that was a pretty big influence on my process, you know, adding a color to my palette. Now, I've talked about not using black in other videos, and I still believe in that for beginners mainly. When I say beginners, like I mean anybody who's not extremely comfortable with just the primaries in white. Like I'd recommend waiting until you can just kind of subconsciously mix the right colors with the primaries in white. You're not even thinking about it. You're just going and you just kind of feel it and you just know how to get to the color you want before adding black, because so many times I've seen people add black to their palette and slowly but surely they just keep going back to it again and again to darken any color that they have. And that can really kill a color and it can really gray it down and make it dull. If you don't know how colors works, I highly suggest checking out the color mixing video from my Foundations of Oil Painting course. I have that available for free. Link to that is in the description below. All right, and the last thing that I did, which is probably the most important thing that you should take away from this video, is that I made sure to have fun with this. You know, I found things that I wanted to paint that were fun to paint. You know, I will paint movie characters that I like. You know, I did a portrait of my dad from the 70s that I actually had done a painting of like 10 years ago. So it was actually pretty cool to, you know, do that painting and compare it to a painting that I did before, kind of see how far I've come in the past decade. I think it's so important to, enjoy the process of painting. I did these portraits and exercises and everything solely for just the enjoyment of doing them. Like, I have no intentions of selling any of these. I mean, if somebody wants to buy one, I'll sell it to them. I wasn't thinking like, oh, like, I'm gonna paint this and, hopefully, someone will like it and someone will want to buy it, so I'm gonna choose this subject or whatever. Or like, oh, this is gonna do well on social media. Like, wasn't thinking about that at all. I was just thinking like, am I gonna enjoy the hours I'm gonna spend painting this thing? So have fun when you're practicing. Paint your friends, grab photos of them from online and surprise them with a painting. Paint for the process, not the end product. All right, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. I just really hope that you can take something away from this to implement in your own practice and work to make yourself get better and get past any plateaus that you're at. If you want to check out any of my painting courses, links to those are in the description below. And if you want to see what I'm painting on a daily basis, you can follow me on Instagram at Forza43. I'm Chris Fornatero, here telling you to go get painting.